Hello, everybody, and welcome to Flex and the City. We have Rosie Guest, who is the Global Head of Marketing and Communications at Apex. And I believe, Rosie, you are our first millennial leader on the podcast.
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome, Rosie. Very welcome. So I'd love you to tell me a little bit, Rosie, about how you came to be the Global Head of Marketing and Communications at Apex. Just tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to be doing that job.
Well, I think like many people, unless you're kind of moving into a vocation, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. At first, I thought I was going to be a musician. Then I wanted to be a film director. And I quite quickly realized that I wasn't going to make very much money in either of those roles unless I was straight away at the top of my game. So I went to university, I graduated, I did a kind of literature-based degree, and I graduated in the recession. So it was difficult to find a job, and I did what many people did and went into sales. So I was very lucky actually. The first company that I worked for was a really nurturing company. There was a purpose-driven element to it, which kind of allowed me to get into selling and get behind the product. And then I kind of sidestepped really. Since then, it's just been through meeting people and gradually finding my home, which is at Apex and in marketing. And I think that foundation in sales really enables me to leverage the kind of revenue generating marketing that function has become today. It's a real commercial function, a business function, not just kind of the coloring in that it used to be in the past. So yeah, that was my journey, and an unusual one, but an interesting one.
Very good. Well, I know you're very passionate about your role. I'd love to know how you might describe, or how you might think other people might describe your own leadership style, Rosie.
I hope that it would be described as nurturing. I think I try to be as communicative as possible and try to lead by example. I think that's really important. So in terms of work ethic, communication skills, those are things that I hold dear, and integrity as well. I think that's really critical to being a good leader, in having honesty in everything you do and having a passion and a drive. And people feed off of that energy. So if you can show that you're passionate about something, even if they don't feel that same way, people tend to feed off of that. So hopefully those things combined.
I'm sure they are. And as a millennial woman in the financial services industry, would you say it's been an advantage or not, Rosie?
I think it's what you make of it. I think it's no secret that being a female within the financial services space, you're naturally in a minority. That is changing, but it's also still a reality. And I think for me, it's been an advantage. But I think you have to be brave and you have to be bold, and you have to challenge. And then what that brings in terms of advantage is a different perspective. And that's something that's extremely valuable to businesses, and businesses are waking up to that. And thankfully, that's something that's supported at Apex. Diversity of thought at the senior level of the business is critical to making the right decisions. And industries are changing, financial services is changing, expectations of businesses and leaders are changing. So having that diversity of thought is really important. And I think it goes beyond just female. I think that diversity in age groups at the senior leadership is important, ethnicity, all those kind of areas. And the more experiences and people you can bring to the conversation, the more you can challenge the norm and change for a better future. And I think that's where financial services is trying to go. It's certainly what we're trying to do at Apex.
Very good. So normally before I do these podcasts, I do, quite a bit of research on the person that I'm interviewing. I didn't need to do too much about you, because I know, because of my daughter, that you are a bit of a celebrity on Instagram. You are Average Baker, aren't you, Rosie? So I'm really curious about what does Average Baker, and what do you learn from being Average Baker on Instagram? What does it bring to your day job?
Do you know what? I haven't had much time recently to bake, but what I do love about baking, and I was thinking about this earlier, is it is a cathartic method for me. So same as going to the gym. Those are kind of my two stress releases, and I think you need those when you're in a busy and sometimes high pressured role. But I think in terms of thinking about baking in relation to what I do in my day job, it's probably around a sense of achievement. Most of the things that I do, I want to accomplish something. And I think it's the same thing with baking. And the irony with baking something is you spend so many hours putting something together and finessing it at the end. I like to make extravagant birthday cakes for my friends and family. And once you've finished, it's there for about 2 seconds and everyone eats it. But I think in terms of how that relates to business and the way I do things in a work context is it's that having a concept, having an idea, bringing that to fruition. So either rolling out an initiative, something that you're really passionate about, and seeing a tangible change at the end of it. And that's what you achieve through baking. You create something, and it's what you can achieve in a business environment if you can follow things through and really drive change forward. So I guess there's the parity between those two things, and the creative as well.
Yeah. And is there a celebrity pet baker that you really admire, Rosie?
I think I admire anyone on Instagram. It's kind of the thing that I look at on Instagram outside of my friends and family, amazing cakes, but no one in particular.
No one in particular. So it's not Paul Hollywood then?
No, certainly not.
No, it's not Paul Hollywood. Okay, all right. So as I said at the beginning, you are a millennial, Rosie. So I'm very curious to know whether you think there's any difference between how millennials lead and how Generation X and baby boomers lead.
Yeah, I think naturally there is, coming from a different generation, going through different experiences. There's always going to be a slight difference, but I do think that whatever age you are as a leader today, expectations are changing. You know, people are looking to work for purpose-driven businesses. It's not enough. If you take financial services, 20 years would have been absolutely fine to have a kind of lofty figure at the top of the business that nobody ever really sees and nobody really knows much about. And that's not really acceptable anymore. It's not really the kind of place that people want to work. And we've done a lot of work trying to ensure that we humanize our executive committee for the rest of the business here and enable them to understand what the objectives are. I think if people can't understand why the business is making certain decisions, how are they supposed to get on board with it? And people want to understand those things now. And one of the things we've done at Apex actually that I'm personally excited about, and I think that it's a huge step forward for the business and financial services in terms of innovation, is we've appointed a shadow executive committee. And so that is a group of high achieving non-exec personnel who can bring a diversity of thought to that leadership conversation. And I think that that's what you need. You need to bridge the gap between the generations and the leaders and the people so that everyone can connect to the brand, the culture and the mission of the business.
Okay, very good. So Rosie, in your own career, I'm interested to know which leaders might have inspired you in your own career and been great mentors as you've evolved.
Yeah, I mean, there's many people that I've taken tips and tricks from, but I think what's interesting about my career is I've kind of done a full circle. So the first company that I worked for that gave me the chance in the sales role and where I kind of cut my teeth in business was a large Japanese corporation called Kyocera. The reason I wanted to work there was because of the purpose-driven sentiment to the business. So ultimately they're a ceramics manufacturer, but the founder, Dr. Inamori, was a philanthropist. I had completely admired the fantastic culture that he created at Kyocera, and it was a brilliant place to work. And the only reason I left actually was just in terms of career and finding the right role for me. And then what I've ended up doing in finding a home at Apex is, again, fund administration or financial solutions are not a passion of mine. However, it's a brilliant entrepreneurial place to be, a place where ideas are heard. And again, we're now looking at this environmental social governance. We're just rolling out a new product that will help benchmark private companies against their environmental, social, and governance factors to make sure that they're making incremental changes to be better businesses. So again, it's something that I can really get behind in terms of a purpose for the business. So I think leaders, and you know, our leader here, Peter Hughes, has actually just been listed in Global Custodians 30 to shape the future. And that's because of the amazing transformation Apex has experienced and also the pioneering of these new kind of sustainability-based products. And I think if you have a leader like Dr. Inamori or like Peter that's extremely passionate about what they believe in, that's inspiring as somebody that's kind of learning from them.
Absolutely. I mean, here at FTS Global, we're passionate about purpose and passion. So you're echoing what we think as well, Rosie, there. I don't know if you listened to the podcast, the last podcast with Mike Tumulty from Standard Life Aberdeen, and he's been involved in bringing together Standard Life and Aberdeen, a merger. So I'm very curious because I know that you at Apex have had to manage 11 acquisitions in the last 2 years, so a real feat. What do you think are the key leadership styles that are required when you're managing something so complex?
I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's complex. And I think the key to mergers and acquisitions is the fact that the most difficult thing to integrate is people, and the most unpredictable thing is people. So the key to getting it right is communication and constant reiteration and constantly looking at different ways of engaging with your staff. So when I last looked at it, and it was a couple of years ago, was we first began this journey of acquisition, 60% of our staff, and you mentioned earlier millennials, 60% of our staff were millennials. So we had to think about how do those people, how do we reach them? How do they want to receive information? What do they want to understand about the company? And from there, that's informed our communication strategy and how we deal with our staff and how we enable them to engage with what's going on at the business, how we help them feel part of a cohesive brand rather than disparate sub brands, or maintaining prevailing cultures. But how do we bring everyone together as a community? And the purpose there is to, again, as we mentioned earlier, help people feel closer to the senior leadership team. We live streamed our senior management conference earlier this year. We asked pulse survey questions to our staff to have them involved, and I think it's creating a conversation, and communication is the crux to success in merging acquisitions, and bringing people together under one brand.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So as a marketeer, and clearly your marketing and communication skills have been invaluable as a leader in managing those mergers, Rosie. So if you were rebranding financial services in its entirety, what would you do?
Well, I think the first thing we'd have to think about is, I mean, the perception. Financial services has suffered some really negative perception, and people think that it's all about money, which really isn't true. And I think that's, I mean, similar in terms of transforming a brand is what we have to do at Apex. You know, couple of years ago, we were a mid-tier fund administrator. Now we're this colossal financial services provider delivering everything from fund administration through to custody, depository, corporate solutions, ESG reporting. So it's about thinking about the prevailing perception and trying to work out how to transform it. And it's a complex process, and it's what we're trying to do in terms of repositioning and help our employees, help the market, help our clients understand who we are now. And I think that's what you'd have to start with financial services, because we know what happened in the past, but who is financial services now? It's an industry that's really trying to make a change and think about sustainability and adjust perception. And you can only do that from the ground up. So you have to start at the roots and think about your people and how you drive change internally, and then echo that with your clients and the wider industry.
Absolutely. So Rosie, if you were posting something on Instagram as Average Baker about financial services, but giving us a baking analogy, and you were sort of comparing financial services in the past to financial services now, what would you say? Sorry, that's a tough question, Rosie.
I would go with, let's say, banana bread, because it's quite hard to go wrong there. You're just going to shove all the ingredients in and out comes the bread. Moving from that to a soufflé, I think you have to keep an eye on a souffle, and it can quite easily collapse, and everything has to be just so. So I would say, moving from one to the other, you've got to have the right skills, the right ingredients, the right people in the right places, and you've got to keep an eye on it. I think that's where sometimes we go wrong, is we create a solution and leave it there, but you've got to be constantly evolving, changing, keeping your finger on the pulse. And as leaders, that's what you're accountable for and what you're responsible for in delivering to the rest of the business.
Absolutely. Rosie Guest, Average Baker, Head of Marketing Communications at Apex. Thank you so much for being part of Flex and the City.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, Rosie.